What bloody man is that? He can report, it seemeth by his plight, of the revolt the newest state. This is the sergeant who, like a good and hearty soldier, fought against my captivity. Hail, brave friend, sail to the king, the knowledge of the broil as thou didst leave it. So these are the opening lines of Act 1, Scene 2 of Macbeth, Shakespeare. And everyone seems to think that Shakespeare is an important part of our cultural history. And as a teacher of Shakespeare, I would argue that that is true to a certain extent. However, for being such an important part of our history, we have a hard time understanding the language. So one of the first things I have to do with my students is help them to grasp some of the complicated language that's in there. I've developed several different tools over the years to help them do this. And in the unit that I describe in the UDL project is geared towards helping students be able to understand this text. So the first thing that we do is we start with how to read Shakespeare. So I give them this document here, and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. You'll notice that it says read it twice, read it again, read it again, read it again, and that is certainly true. The more you practice with something, the more familiarity you're going to get with it. But there are some other important things that students, important tools that students are going to use in order to understand the text as they read it. Reading sentences to the end of full stops and not the end of the line, that is essential. Because once you do that, then you start to understand what is being said here. Otherwise, it's what bloody man is that? He can report. And that makes no sense at all. As seemeth by his plight of the revolt, the newest state. So while we are speaking in verse, and typically we are trained when we are reading poetry to pause at the end of a line, mentally, you need to make those connections between line and line until you get to the end of a full stop. So it's tips like that that help students to understand the text better. The version that we have students read out of has important notes, making sure that you understand the basic plot of the scene that you're reading, how it fits in with the plot of the whole play. And then this one, make sure you understand the characters, their actions, their motivations. And so what that does is that goes to this document here. This document here is characterization in drama. And so we teach that there are three ways to determine characterization: what they say, what they do or have, and what others say about them. But there are some other important things that are unique to drama, because that is characterization in all literature. Unique to drama are these two: action, reaction, drive, and desire. And what I do is I teach this as just a human skill. The idea that we go through life not with a script that we are reading off of, but that we are acting, reacting to what's going on around us. And our actions, our reactions come from our desires, and they drive us in order to get what we want. And when we are prevented from getting what we want, we have ways of going about that. We react to that. And that really is the driving force behind most of the conflict in Shakespeare plays, but also in life as well. So what we'll do is we'll spend some time talking about these things and talking about how they relate to this scene. Malcolm is Duncan's son. Duncan is the king. The king is under attack from a bunch of rebels. How does Duncan react to that action? Malcolm, his son, what is driving him? What are his desires? Is he a good son? Is he a good prince? Or is he ambitious? How much does he want his father to succeed? Or would there be some benefit to him if he didn't succeed? If his father, the king, didn't succeed? He says that the captain here, who is wounded, is a man who got his wounds fighting for Malcolm. So what does Malcolm do to show the captain his gratitude and the connection that they have with each other? Well, so that leads to a couple of other skills that we talk about in this unit. How lines are delivered. We don't talk in a monotone. We have We have a variation in voice that communicates a particular subtext. For instance, I can say, "It's nice to see you today." And that can mean one thing. I could deliver that sarcastically. I can deliver that in a depressed way. I can deliver that in a really excited way. It really depends on the relationship between the two people and the mood that the person who is delivering the information finds themselves in at that moment. We also talk about gestures. We talk about proximity. What are the nonverbal ways that we communicate with each other? Does Malcolm go and move from behind his father to the captain? Is the captain wounded so badly that he is on the ground? Does Malcolm help him stand up so that he can address the king man to man? Does Malcolm stay behind the king during this whole entire time? What would that suggest about Malcolm? And we talk about what kind of people these are, and we talk about what would those people do in these particular situations. And it really makes the scene a lot longer, but it brings the scene alive. And that's an important part here, where we make sure we understand the characters, their actions, their motivations, and we imagine the movements of the characters. What are their gestures? What is their tone when they're delivering their lines? And to think about why they would be acting the way they are at that time. So after we do all of that, what we'll do is we'll listen to a version, and we'll get to hear professional actors introduce some of that stress. We'll get to hear how they deliver the lines, going all the way to the full stop. And this helps us to process what they're saying better. We'll read along while we're listening to it. We'll also have the accompanying notes so that when language comes up that is unfamiliar, we can take a look at what was being written at that time. When we're unfamiliar with words or terms and they're not explained to us in the notes, then we look it up in our dictionary. We make sure that we understand what all those words mean in their proper context. So we'll listen to it. And then at the end, after we've done some of this work, what we'll do is we'll have some homework where we compare a couple of performances of Macbeth Act 1, Scene 2. Here's one of them. And this is a famous version from late 70s, directed by Roman Polanski. And this portrays a very strong and vibrant Duncan who is riding around on the field of battle on the back of a horse. And he's moving from location to location to location. He is clearly in charge. He has a very energetic, very aggressive attitude to him. And he is able to inspire his troops by doing this. You can see that they really like him as a person. And then we've got this version from the Royal Shakespeare Company, which is probably recorded in the mid to late 80s. And in this one, everyone is coming to Duncan because Duncan is an old man. Duncan is portrayed on his knees praying at the opening part of this line, as opposed to the Polanski version where he is riding in on a horse, trumpets blaring. And so we get a really stark portrayal between these two Duncans. And so what I'm asking students to do while they're watching is I'm asking them to think about their age and their relative strength and think about what those choices mean for that interpretation of the character of Duncan. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to make sure that we have an understanding of the impact of Macbeth's murder of Duncan. If Duncan is a king that is not well respected, and we do have to remember he's in the middle of quelling a rebellion right now. What is the reason for that rebellion? We are not told. But if Duncan is not a very strong, well-respected, well-liked military leader, then that might leave openings. And that portrayal might Macbeth seem less ruthless than if he is a very well-liked king. He could also be a very abusive king, and that might change the way that you see Macbeth as well. So we want to think about age and relative strength. We want to think about the setting. Being out on the field of battle versus being in a darkened room that is supposed to be like a chapel where the king would go to pray. Those change things as well. The number of people that are surrounding Duncan and how safe he is, that is also another thing. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get the students to think about the performance of the play and not just reading and decoding the words. The reading and decoding the words are important, obviously, but If you are just doing that and you're not getting a sense of the performance, then you're losing an important part of the vibrance of the play. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the kids to engage, get the students to engage with these characters on a human level. And so the questions help to do that as well. So there's a lot of guidance here provided by me, guided practice, and then they go off and they do their observations on their own in their performances. We act out some of this in class where we say, what's the choice that you would make? What's the choice that you would make? And how would you show that here? And then what they can do is they can compare some of the decisions that they made for their in-class performances to what the directors of these two professional productions, what they chose to do. All in all, we get an opportunity for the students to start to build their interpretation through the choices that they make for performance. So we get an audio version, we get a video version, we have some guided practice, we have some independent practice. The guided practice is collaborative because we have the students work as a class, each sharing different ideas. Students have an opportunity to ask and answer questions, and so we hit a lot of the UDL principles, guidelines, and checkpoints through this unit.